أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على رسول محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم ثلاثة على كثبان المسك يوم القيامة يغبطهم الأول والآخرون عبدا أدى حق الله وحق مواليه ورجل يؤم قوما وهم به راضون ورجل ينادي بالصلوات الخمس في كل يوم وليلة. Peygamber sallallahu aleyhi ve sellem buyuruyor ki kıyamet gününde misk tepeler üzerine 3 kişi vardır ki
Our beloved Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, says that on the day of judgment there will be 3 types of people who will have an abode on the hills of musk.
Öncekiler de sonrakiler de onlara gıpta edecektir. Yani
and those will be envied by all others. They will be standing on the hills of musk on the day of judgment.
Kıyamet günü hali çok berbat olur.
The state during the day of judgment will be terrible and devastating, but there are 3 types of people who will have a place on the hills of musk.
Onlar en güzellerde misk tepelerinde otururlar.
They will be sitting in the most beautiful places on those hills, which have the perfumes of musk.
Onlar da herkes onları gıpta eder.
And all others will envy them.
Keşke biz de öyle olsak diye şey yapar.
And they will envy them, and they will wish if only they could also be in the places they are on top of those hills.
Bunlar Allah ve Efendisine karşı olan görevlerini yerine getiren.
Those who will have a place on the hills of musk on the day of judgment are the ones who fulfill their obligations and their duties towards their Lord Allah Almighty and their prophet and the Prophet, peace be upon him.
Şöyle cemaatte imamlık yapıp kendisinden razı olan imam.
Those who have led the Jama'ah as imams and have made their Jama'ah to be pleased with them as imams.
Gündüz ve gece 5 vakit namaz için çağrı yapan müezzindir.
And the muadhins who have called to prayer 5 times a day. Those are the 3 groups of people who will have a place on those hills of musk.
Bunlar öyle herkes onları gıpta eder.
And everyone will be envying them on the day of judgment.
Makamları yüksek.
Their stations will be high.
قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم تجوزوا في الصلاة فإن خلفكم الضعيف والكبير وذا الحاجة. Peygamber sallallahu aleyhi ve sellem buyuruyor ki namazı kısa tutun. Zira arkanızda zayıf, yaşlı ve ihtiyaç sahibi kişiler bulunmaktadır.
Our beloved Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, said that when you lead the prayer as imam, keep the prayer short in respect of the Jama'ah, because in the Jama'ah there may be people who are weak, who are needy, and may not be able to stand for a long time.
Yani farz namazını kılıp da cemaatine kılan imam kalabalık cemaat varsa o cemaatte her türlü insan olduğu için onun için biraz kısa tutsun, çok uzatmasın diyor Peygamber sallallahu aleyhi ve sellem.
Thus our beloved Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, says that when someone leads the prayer as the imam, he should be aware of the Jama'ah behind him and be respectful of the Jama'ah, especially when the Jama'ah is crowded and when there are all kinds of types of people. He should make sure that the prayer is not too prolonged, but delivered in a succinct, short manner, in respect of those who may have a condition and who may be in need and who may not be able to attend the prayer for too long.
قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم ثلاث لا يحل لأحد أن يفعلهن لا يأم رجل قوما فيخص نفسه بالدعاء دونهم فإن فعل فقد خانهم ولا ينظر في قعر بيت قبل أن يستأذن فإن فعل فقد دخل ولا يصلي حقن حتى يتخفف. Peygamber sallallahu aleyhi ve sellem buyuruyor ki 3 şey vardır ki bunların yapmak hiç kimseye helal değildir. Yani bu yapılan şeyler hayır değil, şerdir diyor.
Our beloved Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, says that there are 3 things which are not blessed There are three things which are evil, which are not halal to anyone.
Birincisi bir topluluğa imamlık yapan ve duayı kendisine has kılıp cemaati duasına katmayan kişi imamlık yapmasın.
Our beloved Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, says that one of those people who do something which is not blessed, on the contrary is evil, is that when somebody leads the prayer as imam and then makes the supplication but does not pray for the benefit of the Jama'ah but only prays for himself, then that is an evil act.
Yani şimdi dua yapıyor, duasında herkesi yapacak, duasına dahil edecek. Tek başına olan onun hayır, kendisine hayır değil, zaten başkasına dua etmiyor. Kendime hayır yapıyor zanneder. Halbuki şer yapmış olur kendisine.
When you make a supplication, you should not only pray for yourself, but you should also pray for the benefit and the blessing of others. Especially when you are the imam, you should make sure to include in your prayers the Jama'ah. And even though you may thinking that you are doing something good because you are making a supplication, but if you do not include the others, especially as the imam, if you do not include the Jama'ah, then you are in fact doing something evil, which is not beneficial to you. It is not beneficial to you and nor to others.
Müslüman herkese dua eder.
A Muslim is someone who prays for everyone.
Öyle yaptığı zaman cemaata hainlik etmiş olur. Yani bu kişi kendine o imamlık yaparken kendine dua edip ve cemaate etmeyen insan imam hain olur. Ona hainlik etmiş olur cemaata.
Our beloved Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, says that if the imam does only pray for himself and does not include the Jama'ah in his supplication, then that imam has betrayed his Jama'ah and has become a traitor.
Kişi izin istemeden bir evin içine bakmasın. Yani
Our beloved Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, now speaks of the second group of people who perform evil acts. If somebody looks inside of a house without asking for permission, that is an evil act.
Bunu bazen insanlar yapıyor. O insanların özel yeridir.
Sometimes people do that. They look inside. They look inside a person's private places.
Özel şeyden izin vermedikten sonra sen ona bakma.
Without any permission, you are not entitled to look inside someone else's house or someone else's private belongings.
O da şerdir yani.
That is also an evil act.
Eğer bakarsa o eve girmiş sayılır.
If you look inside a house without having asked and without having the permission, that is as if you had broken into that house.
Yani onun haneye tecavüz etmiş olur, hırsız gibi olur, yapar. Onun için
to look inside a house without having the permission is acting like a thief and breaking in and trespassing the boundaries of that house, of that private area.
O evlere içeriye pencereden yapıp da yaparsa bakmasın.
Therefore, be cautious. Do not look inside houses. Don't look over fences or through windows. Don't do that.
Kişi abdestte sıkışık olduğu halde rahatlamadan namazı durmasın. Yani sıkışık abdestini tazele, ondan sonra namaza dur.
And thirdly, our beloved Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, says an act which is not blessed is that when you actually need to go to the bathroom when you are in a hurry, but you pray nevertheless while being under that pressure, that is also not a blessed act. You should first relieve yourself before performing your prayer.
Çok acil durum varsa başka ama böyle normal vakitlerde sıkışmış, hadi ben abdest bozmadan namazımı kılayım derse o hayır etmiş olmaz, şer olmuş olur ona.
There may be some exceptional conditions where you cannot relieve yourself before praying. That is something else, but what is mentioned here is clearly that someone is postponing going to the bathroom and performs his prayer while being under the pressure.
قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم جلوس الإمام بين الأذان والإقامة في المغرب من السنة Peygamber sallallahu aleyhi ve sellem buyuruyor ki imamın akşam vakti ezan ile ikamet arasında oturması sünnettendir.
Our beloved Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, says that after the recitation of the adhan for Maghrib prayer and right before the recitation of the iqamah to the prayer, it is the sunnah to sit.
Akşam ezanla ikamet arasında normalde namaz kılınmaz ama bazı mezheplere göre kılınır. Onun için biz kılıyoruz. Kılmayan da oturması lazım orada en azından bir iki dakikası.
In fact, after the recitation of the adhan for Maghrib and before the recitation of the iqamah for the fard prayer, there should be no other prayer performed. According to some madhabs, there is a sunnah prayer to be performed right before the iqamah, after the adhan for Maghrib prayer. But even if one does not perform that sunnah prayer after the adhan and before the iqamah, one should sit down. It is the sunnah to sit down before continuing with the recitation of the iqamah for Maghrib prayer.
قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم الجهاد واجب عليكم مع كل أمير برا كان أو فاجرا وإن هو عمل الكبائر عمل الكبائر والصلاة واجبة عليكم خلف كل مسلم برا كان أو فاجرا وإن كان هو عمل الكبائر والصلاة واجبة عليكم على كل مسلم يموت برا أو كان فاجرا والصلاة واجبة عليكم على كل مسلم يموت برا كان أو فاجرا وإن هو عمل الكبائر. Peygamber sallallahu aleyhi ve sellem buyuruyor ki iyi ve kötü biri olsun her Müslüman idareci ile birlikte cihat etmeniz size vaciptir.
Our beloved Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, says that whether he is a good person or not, you are obliged to perform jihad behind a Muslim governor, a Muslim representative.
Yani sana emir verdi, senin ulul emir, idareci dedi, hükümettir, şeylerdir, komutandır falan. Ondan iyi ya kötü insan olsa gene cihat etmek ondan vaciptir. Yani cihadı bırakıp da kaçmak olmaz.
So if your government or if your commander or gives you an order, you are obliged to fulfill the order and to continue to make jihad. Under no circumstances you are allowed to desert and leave jihad.
İyi veya kötü her kötü biri olsun her Müslüman imamın arkasında namaz kılmanız size vaciptir.
And this applies whether that person is good or bad. Regardless of that, you're not allowed to desert and to leave jihad, but you are obliged to fulfill the order of the one in power, the government or the commander or that representative. And it also applies that when the imam leads the prayer, you are obliged to pray behind him and to join the Jama'ah, regardless of whether that person is good or bad.
Burada bir şey eksiltmişler. İyi kötü hatta büyük günah işlemiş olsa bile.
And even goes further. Even if the imam leading the prayer may have committed a major sin, you are still obliged to pray behind him.
Onun arkasında cihat etmeniz vaciptir. Namaz kılmanız imamın arkasında gene vaciptir.
If the one who is in power, who is in charge, may have committed a major sin, you are still obliged to obey his order. And even if the imam may have committed a major sin, you are still obliged as the Jama'ah to pray behind that imam.
Büyük kebair dedi, yani içkiydi bilmem yani büyük günahlar, onlar olsa bile onun arkasında kılmanız vaciptir.
So even if the imam may have committed a major sin like drinking alcohol or any other major bad act, you're still obliged as the Jama'ah to pray behind the imam.
Şimdi çoğu insanlar bazen Kabe'de oradaki imam Vehhabidir, onun arkasına asıl kılalım. İşte onun için her imamın arkasına bakmayacaksın sen, araştırmayacaksın. Kâmet geldi mi, getirdi mi, imamına varsa camide imam, herhangi bir imamın arkasına durman lazımdır, vaciptir sana.
And this is an important matter because there are people who even at the Kaaba who don't pray behind the imam saying that is a Wahhabi, or even they don't pray behind the imams of a mosque. You must pray if the Iqamah is recited and there is an imam leading the prayer. It is your obligation to join that Jama'ah and to pray behind that imam without questioning the imam and without researching who that imam is.
Bırakıp da onları tek başına kılmak olmaz.
It is not appropriate to not pray behind an imam when there is a Jama'ah and the imam ready leading the prayer. It is not appropriate to pray for yourself in such cases.
Maalesef bazı şeyler var, cemaatler var, ne cuma kılar, ne şey yapar, onlar darhap der, fasıktır der, şu der, İslam'ı bölerler, o olmaz işte.
And unfortunately, there are in fact many groups who may make excuses to not even perform Jummah prayer, who make excuses to not pray behind the imams at the mosques, saying that there is no Islamic rule, so there is no obligation to follow an imam and to join the congregation, they say.
والصلاة واجبة عليك وعلى كل مسلم يموت برا كان أو فاجرا إن هو عمل الكبائر. Hatta büyük günahlar işte Müslüman öldüğü vakit onun namazını kılmak vaciptir.
And also it is an obligation that if a Muslim dies to perform the funeral prayer of that Muslim.
Vacip o iyi olsun kötü olsun büyük günahlar işlemiş olsa bile iyi veya kötü olsun her Müslüman cenaze namazını kılmak vaciptir.
It is an obligation to perform the funeral prayer for every Muslim, regardless of whether that Muslim was a good person or a bad person, or whether he committed major sin throughout his life.
Farz-ı kifayedir. Farz-ı kifaye dedi. Birisi kılsa bütün Müslümanlardan düşmüş olur.
It is a collective duty to perform the funeral prayer of a deceased Muslim. It is not an obligation for every individual. So if the community, if the collective group performs the funeral prayer, that obligation has been fulfilled.
Yok kılmasa yani hepsi günaha girmiş olur.
However, if the funeral prayer of a Muslim is not performed, then the entire community will carry the burden of the sin of not having fulfilled this obligation.
Onun için biz akşam namazından sonra bu farz-ı kifaye olan şeyi ifade etmek için gayb cenaze namazı kılınıyor.
And that is why we, after Maghrib prayer, in order to fulfill that collective duty, we perform a funeral prayer, even though we perform that funeral prayer in absence.
Bazı insanlar şaşırıyor, ne yapıyor bunlar, böyle cenaze var burada, ne yapıyor?
Sometimes people wonder why we perform funeral prayer after Maghrib prayer. They don't see any dead body.
O dünyada nerede olursa olsun belli olmuyor. İşte,
but we perform that funeral prayer in absence, and because you never know where and when somebody died, where and when a Muslim died.
Şimdiki halde o kadar insanlar Müslüman ölüyor.
And so many Muslims die.
Müslüman olmuş, haberi olmamış insanların ondan Müslüman olduğundan.
And also people who become Muslim without noticing die.
Onu defnederken orada namazını kılmak vaciptir.
And it is an obligation to perform the funeral prayer for all these people who died without anyone noticing and without anyone performing the funeral prayer. So in order to fulfill that collective duty, we perform a funeral prayer after every Maghrib prayer in order to fulfill that collective duty.
Için bu akşam namazından sonra Allah makamları âli olsun. Meşayihlerim Şeyh Babın, Şeyh Abdullah Dağısı Hazretleri, onların sünnetidir bu. Her akşam kılmak. O vakit ümmetten düşmüş oluyor o günah.
And this is the custom and habit which we have inherited by Mawlana Shaykh Abdullah Daslan and by Mawlana Shaykh Nazim. May Allah Almighty raise their ranks and stations, who would always pray after Maghrib prayer, a funeral prayer, even though in absence. But by having performed that prayer, they lift the duty of the entire Muslim community of performing the funeral prayer for a deceased Muslim.
قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم ليصلي الرجل في المسجد الذي يليه ولا يتبع المساجد. Peygamber sallallahu aleyhi ve sellem buyuruyor ki kişi yakınındaki mescitte namaz kılsın.
Our beloved Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, says that you should go to the masjid nearby.
Onda bir hoşunda kılmak için diğer mescitlere gitmesin.
There's no need to go to a distinct remote masjid. One can go to the masjid nearby to perform his prayers.
Yakın varsa onda devamlı kalabilirsin, daha iyi.
If there's a masjid nearby, you can continuously perform your prayers in that masjid which is nearby. That is better for you.
قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم الرحمة تنزل على كل إمام ثم على من يمينه الأول فالأول. Peygamber sallallahu aleyhi ve sellem buyuruyor ki rahmet önce imamın üzerine iner.
Our beloved Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, says that Allah Almighty's mercy during prayer first descends onto the imam.
Sağ tarafından yanındakine şekilde devam eder.
And then it spreads to the right, and from the right in continuous person per person, row per row.
Yani ilk safta olan imam sonra sağdan öyle gider.
So during the prayer, Allah Almighty's mercy first descends upon the imam, then to the right, and then it continues person for person, row per row.
Sonra ikinci saf filan.
And up until to the second row, and then it continues to spread throughout the entire Jama'ah, row per row.
قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم صلي بصلاة أضعف القوم ولا تتخذ مؤذنا يأخذ على أذانه أجرا. Peygamber sallallahu aleyhi ve sellem buyuruyor ki namazı kavminin en zayıfına göre kıldır.
Our beloved Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, says that when you lead the prayer, be respectful of your Jama'ah and perform that prayer. Our beloved Prophet, peace be upon him, says according to the weakest among that Jama'ah.
Yani hasta bir adam fazla uzatmayalım. Ona nasıl kaldırırsa ona göre namaz kılın.
So within that Jama'ah there may be someone undergoing a condition or being ill, and the imam should perform the prayer according to the condition of the weakest among the Jama'ah.
Fazla uzatmaya gerek yok.
There's no need to prolong their prayer in such conditions.
Fazla da çok çabuk da kılıp da adam yetişmesin de onu da yapma.
Also, one should not pray too fast, because when one prays too fast, some people, elderly or people with conditions, may also not be able to follow the imam.
Ona göre kıl.
One should adjust one's style and rate one's style of prayer according to the condition and the circumstances of the Jama'ah.
Müezzinliğine karşılık ücret alan birini müezzin edinme.
Our beloved Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, says, do not appoint someone to be muadhin who asks for recompensation for being muadhin.
Allah Azze ve Celle müezzinin karşılığını vermiş.
It is Allah Almighty who recompensates the muazzin.
Şimdi maalesef müezzinler para aldıkları halde ezan okumuyorlar.
Nowadays, however, the muadhins, they are muadhins for money, for recompensation, and even though they get salary for being muadhin, they do not even fulfill their duties as muadhins.
Okuturuyorlar, makineye okuturuyorlar.
So, for example, instead of reciting the adhans at every mosque and every site, they let the machines recite the adhan.
Bütün şeyler ondan sonra da paralarını alıyorlar.
And they get money for being muadhin and get salaries for it.
Allah ıslah eylesin.
May Allah Almighty guide them to become good.
Sadaka Resulullah fîmâ kâle ve kâle. زيادة إلى شرف النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم وأصحابه الكرام، وأرواح جميع الأنبياء والمرسلين وعلماء شرائعهم، وإلى أرواح الأئمة الأربعة، وإلى أرواح مشايخنا في طريقة النقشبندية العالية، خاصة إمام طريقة وغوث الخليقة خواجة بهاء الدين محمد ويسير البخاري سيدنا عبد الخالق الرضواني، مولانا الشيخ شرف الدين داغستاني، مولانا الشيخ عبد الله فاز داغستاني، مولانا الشيخ محمد ناظم عادل الحقاني، وسائر ساداتنا والصديقين ومن أحلف حضرته وجوارهم حسين أفندي رفقائه هذا مصطفى الترابي جمل من ليش مشارف شاهد شهاد وغير السن حارنا جل شر لنا قلت مسجد الله تعالى الفاتحة.